guys, welcome back to Planet Houseplant. Today we're talking about caring for Calathea. I don't think Calathea are impossible for beginners to care for. They're just a little bit more picky than other plants. And they're really pretty and they're actually quite hard to kill. They're also quite hard to get to look great, but they are hard to actually kill. So I think, that if you're interested in looking after houseplants as opposed to just having plants to look good, they are quite good because if you give them the right care, they do improve quite quickly. So they're quite rewarding if you give them the right care. So we're just going to go through it today, obviously. Right, so first point is light. When you get a new plant and you're wondering what light it would like, Google it and see where it lives in the wild. So Calathea come from tropical rainforests, and so that's a geographical location. But you also need to look at what level they live at in the rainforest. So Calathea live on the forest floor and they're not climbers that I'm aware of. So they're never going to get bright light. They're designed to have dappled light. So that's sort of a medium light, possibly low light, but a medium light is preferable. I actually have mine in a dark corner under grow lights and they grow really well because it's a lot of light for energy, but it's not hot, so they won't burn and die. But like a lot of low light houseplants that actually want to live in medium to lower light, so I wouldn't put them on a windowsill, maybe a north facing windowsill, but you could have them, a few feet back from the window and they will be fine. Or in a dark corner with a lamp or something and they'll probably be fine, but just keep an eye on them. And if they're looking a little bit sad, then try moving them, giving them a little bit more light. When it comes to the temperature that they live at, temperature? Calathea do like it a little bit warmer than other plants, but nothing startling. Your regular house temperature will be fine. But I would advise against keeping them in a draft. So try to keep them away from doors and cold windows and that kind of thing. I have had Calathea in what I would consider colder places and they've been okay. But if we're going for like perfect care, then they want to be a little bit warmer than other tropical plants, but not like hot. We're not talking desert, but just, a regular room temperature is probably fine for it. The big thing that Calathea like is humidity. They ideally would like to have the humidity around 65%. I have had it lower, like some rooms in my house like 45, and they're okay. They're not brilliant. They do get crispy tips. But one thing I will say is don't rely on misting for humidity because it's not quite the same. It is the same for like 30 seconds, but it isn't. It won't be enough. But if you do like misting, Calathea are a good one because I've never known plants get so dusty. I don't know if it's just where I have them in my house, but they seem to attract dust like nobody's business. And because quite a lot of them have velvety leaves, they're a bit of a pain to clean. So if you want to mist, go ahead, but you will need a humidifier as well if your house is lower than, I would say if it's lower than 50% humidity all the time, I would get a humidifier. There's one that I recommend in the description. And if you don't want a humidifier and you have a dry house, I just wouldn't get Calathea. They probably won't die. Humidity or lack of humidity isn't something that kills plants, but it can really hinder their growth. So you'll either get like crispy edges to the leaves or the new leaves won't unfurl. They'll just they'll grow and then they will just rot, not rot, they like crisp up. So you might get like half a leaf come out and then the top half will just be like brown and crispy. So if you're not going to invest in a humidifier, you're probably not going to get a great specimen of a plant. There will be people out there that disagree with me, but in my experience, humidity is important when it comes to Calathea. And also, so Calathea hate to dry out. They're one of the few plants that I would recommend not letting get bone dry before watering. If you use a moisture meter, which I tend to for Calathea because they don't have massive strong root systems, so you don't tend to need to repot them very often. A lot of mine are in the same pot that they came with, like their nursery pot. So I just stick the moisture meter in, and I tend to wait until they're at about a 3. Normally I would wait until it's a 2, but for other plants. So when it's a 3, then water. If your humidity is higher, then they won't dry out so quickly. But if you are in a drier environment, then you'll really need to keep on it with the watering, and they really, really don't like to dry out. If they dry out, they won't die. They're not that picky, but they will reflect it in their leaves and you might get like a crispy leaf or a new leaf might die. Another thing about watering is Calathea are quite picky about water quality. How picky they are really varies from specimen to specimen and species to species. So you may have two Calathea that are exactly the same, but one gets a crispy tip if you give it tap water and one doesn't. I try and water with rainwater for Calathea just because I have some rainwater and I know they prefer it, but I have watered them with tap water or aquarium water, which is tap water with dechlorinator added. Yeah, they get crispy tips. They still grow, and I've had them grow pretty well. Like the whole leaves formed properly, but then I do get brown marks on them, and I think that is from using tap water. So when you get Calathea, you need to watch out for spider mites. And when you first get into plants, you might look into, well I did, which pests thrive in which areas. And spider mites typically like hot, dry environments, and Calathea like humid, moist environments. So you would think that they wouldn't come into contact, but they do. Spider mites love Calathea. Especially, in my experience, pinstripe Calathea. They really, really, really like them. Or any of the ones with the dark leaves and the stripes on them. So there's like Calathea white star. Any of those they really, really like. And they look awful really quickly. The first sign I've noticed that Calathea have spider mites is the purple on the underside of the leaves starts to rub off. So if you notice there's like speckling on the underside of the leaves and there's like green marks, that can be a sign that there's spider mites. Also, the purple comes off on your fingers. I have no idea why. I don't even know what the purple stuff's for, but it is a sign that you've got spider mites. Getting rid of spider mites on Calathea is a nightmare. They just won't go. They don't. So I've had plants that have had spider mites for probably about 6 months, and they've not died. They've been fine. They've looked terrible, but they're not dead, and they're still growing pretty quickly. It's just when they get their leaves, they get eaten. So it's not something that's going to kill your plant. I mean, it will if you don't treat it and leave them, but they just look awful. So yeah, I had a Calathea White Star and a Calathea Velvet Touch next to each other, and I know that the spider mites came on the White Star, and they obviously went onto the Velvet Touch. And the Velvet Touch, I washed the leaves down a few times. I treated it with, it was a special spider mite thing that I ordered from Amazon that was, it was okay. It certainly didn't save the White Star. But the velvety, I found that the velvety leaves, the spider mites don't like them as much as the non-velvety leaves. So that is something to consider. But also, like, right, spider mites, they don't like the velvety leaves and they will leave pretty quickly, but they love non-velvety leaves on Calathea and they're impossible to get rid of. But with thrips, they love the velvety leaves and aren't so bothered about the other ones. So there's no good news here. But that is what I've observed, that you need to keep an eye on the thrips on velvet leaves and spider mites on non-velvet leaves. They'll pass to both, but I found that thrips are easy to get rid of on non-velvet and spider mites are easy to get rid of on velvet. So do with that information what you will, and God, keep them washed. When it comes to propagation, I don't think you can propagate Calathea from leaf cuttings, and they don't really have a stem because they grow in the ground. So you propagate Calathea by division. I don't like propagating by division because it just seems so brutal, but you literally just you take the plant out of the pot and you'll be able to see it's got different crowns and you can literally just pull them apart. You know, do it gently because they do have delicate root systems, and Calathea don't particularly like being repotted. It can take them a while to get established again, but that is how you would do it. And linking back to the pests issue, I tend to get pest infestations when I'm really, really busy, and it's, you know, it's because I'm not paying as much attention and they sort of get a hold. And so I often just don't have the time. If it's a plant that I think it's going to be an issue to get rid of pests, if it's a Calathea, I will tend to just cut the leaves back. In fact, I don't think I've got a Calathea that has a significant amount of leaves at the moment because they grow back so well, and I found that they grow back because of the way they grow. You can get loads of new growth points at once. So if you find a Calathea and it's got pests and you just can't deal with it, don't throw it out, cut all the leaves off, and they grow back surprisingly quickly and healthily. Just a little tip there for those of us that are very lazy. and hate dealing with pests. People have asked me if you can keep Calathea in leca. I've never transferred one that wasn't dying. My Orbifolia is currently in leca and it's doing really well. I've seen a lot of horror stories of Calathea just not wanting to, basically just dying and rotting away. So my Orbifolia was literally dying. My rabbit ate half of it and then it got spider mites. Of course it did, from the white star. So I washed all the soil off and put it in leca, not really thinking that it was going to do anything. It's just something that I do because I know it has worked in the past. But now it's putting out new growth, so I would hesitate. If you're new to leca and you've got like a prize Calathea, I would hesitate. I would maybe transfer a few other plants first, just so you really know what you're doing, and then do it. But when it comes to, you know, your plants dying, it can save them. So can you put your Calathea outside? I put a lot of my plants outside in summer just because the light's so good. I wouldn't with Calathea, not because it'll damage them. If you've had a shady spot, it will be fine, just because they dry out so quickly. Plants dry out so much quicker outside than they do inside because there's wind. That's, I believe, the only difference. So there's just air movement and all the water evaporates. So for me, it's just not practical. I'd have to be watering them every day and I'd rather just leave them inside because I don't think it really makes them grow much faster. If you want your Calathea to grow quicker, you need the balance of the humidity and the watering and the no pests and the water quality. It's that sort of thing rather than, you know, a Monstera. You could water it with probably like old bath water. As long as you give it a load of light, it's going to grow quickly. You know, but different things make different plants thrive. And the last thing I just want to discuss is how easy they are to revive. When people say Calathea are hard to care for, they are hard to care for because if you don't care for them properly, they look awful. They get crispy, their leaves don't grow properly, especially the large, once they get big leaves, they just collapse and look so sad, like their leaves just flop over and they just look really sad. But when it comes to actually killing them, unless you consistently let them dry out, which will kill any plant, they're not that hard to kill. They're just hard to keep looking good. So I think they're quite a good plant for beginners because for people that are looking to get into houseplants, not for people that just want a nice piece of decor. If you treat them well, they will reward you and they'll give you a few chances. You know, if you can keep cutting them back and they'll keep growing back, they have quite a vigour for life. Just they're not that interested about looking good doing it. Right, I hope that was helpful and I hope it wasn't ridiculously long like my videos have started to become. So yeah, if you have any questions, just leave them below and I'll link. I've got a blog post on, I've got a couple actually. I've got an article on just general Calathea care and I've got one on reasons that your Calathea has got brown spots, because all Calathea tend to have at least one brown spot at all times. So that's another thing, like if yours isn't looking 100%, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It may just be having a sad day. So yeah, thank you very much for watching and I will see you next time.